So just to get going there, we're looking at slopes again. What we learned in the last couple of lessons was very, very simple. So slopes are equal to rise over run. So just to quickly get going with this, slopes are equal to rise over run. Okay, so slopes are equal to rise over run. Okay, and what we found out the last day was that if something slopes, your y-axis points up, your x-axis goes across. If it slopes like this, it is a positive slope. Okay. So as the x values get bigger, the y values get bigger, so that's a positive slope. If it slopes like this, y, x, if it slopes like this, we'll say, it is a negative slope. Okay, so two types of slope, you've positive or you've negative, and these two slopes there are positive or negative. The only other two kind of ones that would be a little bit tricky, we'll just look at them because it's important that you get the tricky ones too. So let's move that out of the way. If you had something that sloped like this, well, it has to be parallel. So let's say those two there are parallel. Okay. If it slopes like that, it doesn't have a slope. The slope would be equal to 0. Okay. Okay. And it's the exact same if it slopes like that. Okay. So if it slopes straight down. So both of them have a slope of 0. And the reason why is because your rise, in this case, for the first one, your rise there is equal to 0. So if that's equal to 0, obviously, when your rise is 0, your run, in this case, let's just say the run there, for instance, was 10. 0 divided by 10 will still give us 0. Okay? It's the exact same with this line here. So in this case, the rise there, we could say the rise there is equal to 10. But the run in this case is equal to 0. So 10 divided by 0 will leave us with 0. So if you have a line like this, or if you have a line like that, the slope will be equal to 0. So quickly there, we'll just get question 1 done. Which one has a positive slope? And the positive slope in this case is going to be the ones that go this way. So two positive ones, I'll highlight them there, are going to be B and C. So my answer there is going to be B and C. Okay. For the two negative slopes are going to be the ones that slope in the opposite direction. So these ones slope down. So my slope for the negatives is going to be A and D. Okay, so that's the first question done. We'll skip on there to question 3. Okay, so question 3 asks us to find the slope of each of these lines. Okay, I'll do the first one with you. And it tells us to use rise over run. So slope is equal to rise over run. Okay, now you guys need to be able to calculate what the rise and the run is. So how we do that is we look at the line and we find two corners of the box. So this here is in a corner and this here is in a corner. So I'm going to find the rise and the run here for this one. So the rise in this case is going to be this length, and the run in this case is going to be this length. So the rise I can see is going to be 1, 2, and that's how much it's rising up by. And the run in this case is going to be 1, 2, 3. So 3 for the run. So the slope of this line is going to be the rise over the run, which is going to be 2 over 3. And I can't simplify that any further, so I'm going to leave that like that. So question 2, you need to find the rise and the run. So again, we look at it, we find the corner, which is here. We go along the lines, we find the next corner, which is here. They've made it obvious for us, they put it in red. But as we progress, we'll have to see how we find those points. So we need to find where cuts a corner and where cuts a corner. And then we need to look at the rise and the run. So in this case, the rise is how much it rises up. The run is how much it runs across. And in this case, I can see that the rise is going to be equal to 3. And the run is going to be equal to 2. Okay? So in this case, the rise over the run is going to be equal to the rise, which is 3 over 2. Okay? And I can leave that as 3 over 2, or I can write that as 1.5 if I wanted to. Both of those answers would be correct. Or you could write it as 1.5. Okay? So if you wrote it as 1.5, that would also be correct. To be honest with you, normally you'd leave it as a top-heavy fraction. Okay? So what we'll do next is we'll look at the next one. Okay? And the next one there is going to be question 3. So again, we're looking at the slope. So I bring the slope over, and we look at that question there. So in order to find the slope of this line, what we'll need is we'll need the rise and we'll need the run. Okay. So again, we're looking at the corner of a box, the next corner. So we could have actually used this, and I'll show you that in just one sec. But we're actually going to use this corner and this corner. So the rise in this case is going to be equal to 1, 2, 3, 4. So the rise in this case is going to be equal to 4. Okay. The run in this case is going to be equal to 1, 2. So the run will be equal to 2. So if I want the rise over the run, I'll have 4 over 2. And we know there that 4 over 2 is the same as 2, because 4 divided by 2 gives us an answer of 2. Now, what I want to do while we have that is I want to show you this separately, right? So what we're looking at there is, you can see there in the last question, I got the rise over the run. But you can see there, like I was saying to you, normally what we do is we take a corner of a box and we go along the line until we find the next corner. So you can see there, I could have used the rise over the run as these values. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do that out so you can see it. So what I'm saying is that you normally start at the corner and you run along the line till you find the next corner, which would actually be here. So if I was to have used this value here, it would make things easier for myself. And how it makes things easier is I've got smaller calculations. So I'll still have the rise over the run, okay, which I still have. But instead of having 4 over 2, I could have actually used a rise of 2 and a run of 1. So in this case, I could have used a rise of 2 and a run of 1, which would have given me a rise of 2 over a run of 1, which would give me 2. So that's just showing you that when you're doing question 3, you can use these 2 points here, which would make your calculations that bit smaller. Okay, so the slope is the same if you use these values here, okay, because the slope of the line isn't changing. It's just like when we're dealing with fractions, you can scale up and scale down. So here we actually scaled up. Okay, so for this question, they've asked us to try and find the slope of these lines. And what they've done, just because we're starting out with this, is they've picked the corners for you. Okay, so they've given you the corners. They're making this quite easy, right? So they want you to get the slope of this line by using rise over run, and you need to be able to calculate the rise and calculate the run. So in this case, we'll calculate the rise and the run, and what we'll do is we'll say the rise in this case is going to be equal to 3. That's how much it rises up by. And the run in this case is going to be equal to 1. Okay, so the rise over the run will be 3 over 1. So the slope will be equal to 3 over 1. And 3 divided by 1 is going to give us an answer of 3. So you can see there the slope is going to be equal to 3. We'll get on there and we'll try the next part. So the next part there is going to be equal to rise over run again. So we need to work out what the rise and the run is. So if we have a look at that there, the rise and the run are going to be equal to, the rise is going to be equal to 2, and the run is going to be equal to 1, because the difference between these two here is just 1 unit. So the rise is going to be equal to 2, because the difference between 7 and 5 is 2. And the run in this case is going to be equal to 1, because the difference between 1 and 2 is 1 unit. Okay. So in this case, the rise over the run will be 2 over 1. And obviously 2 over 1 is the same as 2. Okay. So that brings us on to the third one there. So with the third one, we'll go through the third one now. I'm expecting you guys to be trying the third one there. So with the third one, it's the same thing again. You can see the third one there is going to be another positive slope. So it's going to be a positive slope. And I want to see how much it's sloping by. So I can see there, I've got 1 unit. So between -1 and 0 is 1 unit. Between this and this is 1 unit. And the reason why it's 1 unit is because if this here is 2, that means that the difference between these two boxes is 1 unit. So I'm just going to fill that in. So obviously the distance between here and here is going to be 1. The difference between here and here is going to be 3. So if I want the rise over the run, the rise is going to be equal to 1 unit, because between 3 and 4 is 1 unit. And the run is going to be between -1 and 0. So the run is going to be equal to 1 also. So now what I need to do is calculate what the rise over the run is going to be. So to calculate what the rise over the run is going to be, the rise is going to be equal to 1. So I'm going to have to put that in. The rise is 1. The run is 1. So 1 divided by 1 leaves me with 1. So the slope of this one is going to be equal to 1. Okay, so there you have your few slopes. Okay. So question 5, it says, why is the slope of the given line segment negative? Okay, so why is the slope of the line here negative? Okay, so all the questions that we worked on for question 3 and for question 4, all the lines were sloping this way and they're all positive. Now we're looking at use the grid to work out the slope of the line. So we're looking at this line here and they want to know why it's negative. The reason why it's negative is because it slopes from left to right. So let's just put that on a grid. So y points up, x goes across, and if we were looking at that line, I'm just going to, this isn't exact, but this is just an idea. This is what it looks like if it was on a grid. Now, that could be anywhere. This line here could be, it could be anywhere, but that's just an example of what it might look like, right? And the reason why this is negative is because as your x values get bigger, okay, so we'll start off with a small x value. So small x value gives us a corresponding y value of, we'll say here, okay? So let's just say the x value there, for argument's sake, let's just say the x value is 1. We'll say that gives us a y value of, we'll just make up these numbers here. So we'll say this value is 4, yeah? Okay. We need to see what happens as the x values get bigger. So we start off with an x value of 1. Let's go on to an x value here of 3. Okay? That'll map onto a y value here, and we'll just call that y value 1. So these are just, we're just putting in estimates here, right? So you can see there, as the x value gets bigger, okay, so it goes from 1 to 3, the y value goes from 4 to 1. So the x value 1 maps onto 4, so 1 and 4 are together. So as x gets bigger and turns into 3, the corresponding y value gets smaller. So as the x value gets bigger, the y value gets smaller. That's why it's a negative slope. Okay. Now, they want us to use the grid to find the slope of the line, right? So we're looking for the slope of this line here, right? Okay. So we're going to find the slope of that line and we're going to use the grid to help us, right? So I'm going to start off by just picking points So if I find the corner of a box, right, then what I do is I run along the line till I find the next corner. Now that doesn't hit a corner, so that's no good to us. So I keep going till I hit a corner. And you'll see there that I finally hit a corner here. Okay. So I hope everyone's clear on that. I find the first corner, so that intersects the corner there. And then I run along the line until it hits another corner, and it doesn't hit another corner until we hit here. So I'll just label that there. Okay. So in order to find the slope, it'll be the rise over the run. And in this case, we can see there that we have a rise of 3, because that's 3 units, 1, 2, 3. And we have a run of 2. So my slope will be equal to the rise, which is 3, over the run, which is 2. Now, we have to be very, very careful here. That represents the slope. But what did we say about the slope? We said the slope was negative. Because it's sloped from left to right. So I need to make sure that I put in my negative sign there in front of it. So my final answer there, the slope of the line will be equal to negative 3 over 2.